All right, saddle up your... Actually, maybe just grab a comfy chair. Forget the stoic heroes and romantic sunsets you see in movies. We're digging into the real American Wild West, a place less about noble pioneers and more about, well, sheer, unadulterated, sometimes hilarious dumbness. Get ready for 33 instances where history decided to faceplant spectacularly. This isn't your grandpa's dusty history lesson. This is the Wild West unfiltered, absurd, and occasionally just plain stupid. Let's get started. 1. Shared bathwater nightmare. Picture this. You've finally dragged your dusty carcass into town, dreaming of soaking away a week's worth of grime, only to discover the local bathing situation involves sharing. Yes, forget your personal spa moment. Tubs were rare, water was work, so the solution was often a horrifying communal dip. One tub, one shrinking pool of lukewarm gray water, used by person after person. Dad, Mom, the kids, maybe Uncle Jedediah, who wrestled a skunk earlier. By the time it's your turn, you're not bathing. You're basically performing a science experiment on just how many human ecosystems can thrive in one bucket. Congrats! You're essentially marinating in the town's greatest hits of sweat, dirt, and who knows what else. You might actually lose cleanliness points. Utterly gag-worthy. 2. Bowler hats over Stetsons. Think Wild West icon. What hat pops into your head? The Stetson, the big bold symbol of the frontier, right? Prepare for a historical curveball. The real king of Western headwear. The hat seen on more gunslingers, lawmen, and gamblers than any other. The humble, dapper, decidedly uncowboyish bowler hat. Seriously, tough guys like Bat Masterson and even outlaws like Butch Cassidy often preferred these rounded domes. Why? They stayed put better in a dust storm, offered a smidge more protection if a chair came flying at your head in a saloon brawl, and maybe they just thought it added a touch of murderous sophistication. It completely shatters the Marlboro Man image. Imagine Wyatt Earp, stern-faced, ready to draw, wearing something out of Mary Poppins. Bizarre. 3. High noon duels? Mostly myth. Forget everything Hollywood taught you about the tense, honorable high noon showdown. That dramatic street duel where two stoic figures face off? Almost pure fantasy, folks. Real gunfights were brutal, clumsy, chaotic messes. Think less ballet, more bar fight, spilling into the street with added bullets flying everywhere except maybe the intended target. It was often a sudden ambush from behind, a drunken argument escalating way too fast, or just a panicked flurry of shots where the luckiest guy was the one who didn't accidentally shoot himself in the foot first. The meticulously choreographed standoff was box office gold, but the reality was far more likely to involve tripping over a stray dog while fumbling for your weapon than any kind of cinematic glory. Honestly, probably more embarrassing than heroic. 4. Prairie oysters. Surprise. All right, you're starving, you belly up to the bar in some dusty saloon, and the menu offers prairie oysters. Sounds intriguingly nautical for the middle of nowhere, right? Maybe a pricey import? You order up, mouth-watering, ready for briny goodness, and what lands in front of you? A plate piled high with deep-fried bull testicles. Boom. Surprise. Yes, apparently, during castration season on the ranches, there was a rather large surplus of these particular items. And in the spirit of waste not, want not, some culinary genius decided the best course of action was to slice them, bread them, and sizzle them up. Talk about truth in advertising being optional. Hope you enjoyed your Rocky Mountain surprise. It's less a delicacy, more a frontier dare disguised as dinner. 5. The U.S. Army's camel calamity. Picture the scene. Some high-ranking U.S. Army official, probably staring at a map, has a brainwave so blindingly brilliant it's actually just dumb. The American Southwest looks like Egypt, kinda. Let's get camels. And they actually did it. In the 1850s, they imported dozens of these grumpy, spitting desert taxis. The result? Pure chaos. The camels smelled, according to reports, like a stable got into a fistfight with a garbage dump and then set itself on fire. They freaked out the horses and mules, who'd never seen such lumpy, awkward beasts. Their feet weren't built for rocks, and the soldiers trained to handle horses were utterly baffled. It was an expensive, embarrassing failure. The camels were eventually auctioned off or simply wandered into the sunset, probably muttering camel curses about manifest destiny. Genius. 6. Cocaine and opium miracle cures. Feeling a bit under the weather in the Old West? Got a cough? Toothache? Existential dread? General weariness from dodging dysentery and bullets? Fear not. Traveling salesmen and local apothecaries had just the elixir. And by elixir, we mean a potent, completely unregulated cocktail of booze, opium, morphine, heroin, or even cocaine. Mrs. Winslow's soothing syrup, marketed for fussy babies, was basically morphine sippy cup. Early Coca-Cola packed a cocaine punch. These medicines promised miracle cures for everything from baldness to boredom, but mostly they just got people dangerously hooked or accidentally killed them. Forget feeling better. You were more likely playing Russian roulette with your internal organs every time you took a spoonful of Dr. Feelgood's patented peptonic. Buyer beware indeed. 7. Tombstone's hilariously strict gun laws. Tombstone, Arizona. The name itself screams gun smoke and showdowns. Home of the OK Corral, Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday. Surely this was the buckle of the gun belt, a town where packing heat was practically mandatory, right? Get ready for the punchline. Tombstone had surprisingly tough gun control laws for the era. Ordinance number 9 made it illegal to carry firearms within the city limits. You were expected, legally obligated, to check your weapons at the Grand Hotel or a livery stable. The legendary gunfight itself? It kicked off precisely because the Earps, acting as lawmen, confronted the Clantons and McClorys for violating this very ordinance. So, the Wild West's most famous gunfight town was actively trying to be a gun-free zone. The irony is thicker than saloon whiskey. 8. Cowboy was originally an insult. Think cowboy. You see John Wayne, rugged individualism, a hero riding off into the sunset. That romantic image? Mostly manufactured hype. Back in the late 19th century, especially just after the Civil War, calling someone a cowboy wasn't a compliment. It was often closer to an insult. It frequently referred to the young, often poor, rough-and-tumble cattle hands known for being rowdy, transient, and maybe not the sharpest spurs on the boots. It implied a lack of sophistication, maybe even shadiness. Definitely not the square-jawed legend we picture. The heroic sheen was buffed on later by dime novelists and Buffalo Bill's Wild West shows, needing a marketable hero. So yeah, call someone a cowboy back then with the wrong tone, and you'd better be ready to duck fast. 9. Forget the image of the lone cowboy owning his trusty steed and pearl-handled revolvers. The reality for most was being spectacularly broke cowboys. Seriously, many of these supposed rugged individualists were little more than underpaid ranch hands, barely scraping by. They often didn't own their horse. Nope, that belonged to the ranch. Didn't own the saddle, sometimes not even the gun they carried. It was all company property, essentially making them gig workers of the plains, renting their tools of the trade. The romantic notion of the self-sufficient frontiersman often crumbles under the weight of basic economics. They were less Lone Ranger, more like temporary employees, hoping payday covered their tab at the equally sketchy saloon. It's a far cry from the wealthy ranchers or mythical heroes of dime novels. 10. While dime novels filled pages with heroic gunfights, a far more common and frankly dumber way lead met flesh was the classic "oops, I shot myself" incident. Accidental self-inflicted gunshot wounds were ridiculously frequent in the Wild West. Picture clumsy cowpokes fumbling with unfamiliar firearms, maybe after a few too many shots of that questionable whiskey, and bang! Suddenly they're hopping around clutching a bleeding foot or worse. Forget quick-draw duels. More injuries probably came from holstering a loaded weapon incorrectly or cleaning a gun they forgot was loaded. It wasn't dramatic, it wasn't heroic, it was just a painful, often embarrassing testament to the fact that handling deadly weapons requires maybe a little more focus than was commonly available. Doh. 11. Speaking of legends, let's talk about Wild Bill Hickok, a man whose reputation was as large as the plains themselves, maybe even larger thanks to his own knack for storytelling and Wild Bill's potentially inflated body count, possibly including his own deputy. While famed as a deadly gunman credited with dozens of kills, Historians suspect Bill heavily padded his resume. But the cherry on top of this legendary fudge cake is the persistent, awkward story that during one chaotic shootout in Abilene, Hickok accidentally blasted his own deputy, Mike Williams, who was running to help him. Imagine the paperwork on that one. Whether strictly true or not, the fact it's a plausible part of his story perfectly captures the chaotic, clumsy, and far from perfect reality often lurking behind the biggest Wild West legends. Awkward. 12. Needed to spruce up the town layout or just decided the saloon had a better view across the street? No problem. Forget zoning laws and demolition crews. In the Wild West, moving entire buildings like they were oversized furniture was a surprisingly common, if utterly bonkers, practice. If a structure wasn't ideally placed, they'd just hoist the whole thing onto logs or massive skids, hitch up a bunch of oxen or horses, and literally drag the building, church, store, house, you name it, to its new location. Imagine looking out your window and seeing the general store slowly sliding past. It was frontier ingenuity meets sheer brute force, a kind of surreal, large-scale home rearrangement that seems both incredibly practical and completely insane by modern standards. Honey, I don't like the bank there, let's move it. 13. Out on the treeless plains and feeling a chill? Wood might be scarcer than honesty at a poker game, but resourceful settlers weren't deterred. Their solution? Burning dried poop for warmth. Yes, you heard that right. Dried buffalo dung, charmingly known as buffalo chips, became a primary fuel source. Families would spend hours collecting these sun-baked patties. Imagine the family bonding activity. Kids, go gather the flammable feces. While practical, it reportedly created a pungent, lingering aroma that was unique. Forget the romantic image of crackling logs in the hearth. Frontier coziness often smelled suspiciously like a canine convention was held indoors. It puts a whole new spin on a warm welcome, doesn't it? 14. The Pony Express. Daring riders racing across the continent, braving danger to deliver mail at unprecedented speed. It's one of the most enduring symbols of the West. And also, the Pony Express was a fast, famous, and spectacular financial failure. This legendary service, for all its romantic appeal and genuinely impressive logistics, lasted only about 18 months. 18. Why? Because just as it got galloping, the transcontinental telegraph line was completed, instantly making horse-delivered mail look like, well, sending mail by horse. It was an incredibly expensive venture that never came close to turning a profit. A triumph of spirit and speed, absolutely. A viable business model? Not even remotely. Talk about being disrupted out of existence almost immediately. 15. Forget sophisticated theater or libraries. Sometimes frontier entertainment got really basic, like the alleged existence of highly competitive spitting contests. While perhaps embellished over time, the idea persists that in some rough-and-tumble towns, men, and presumably only men, one hopes, would gather to see who could hawk a loogie the furthest or with the most pinpoint accuracy, maybe aiming for a spittoon, maybe just a hapless beetle on the sidewalk. It's the kind of activity that perfectly blends boredom, boastfulness, and a complete disregard for what we might politely call hygiene. Imagine the training montages. It speaks volumes about the readily available forms of amusement, or lack thereof, when competitive expectoration becomes a spectator sport. Classy. 16. Thirsty after a long day of competitive spitting, perhaps? Step right up to the saloon for a glass of whiskey. Except this wasn't your smooth, aged bourbon. Frontier rotgut was often whiskey so vile it could probably peel paint, possibly dissolve your insides. To stretch supplies or just add a memorable kick, unscrupulous saloon keepers and distillers would adulterate their liquor with anything from turpentine, ammonia, and chili powder to tobacco spit, formaldehyde, or even gunpowder. Seriously. It wasn't about flavor, it was about potency and profit. Drinking this stuff was less a leisure activity, more like a dare or a desperate gamble with your own esophagus. Forget drink responsibly. The motto should have been, drink and hope you wake up. 17. Apparently, the fear of being accidentally buried alive was so intense back then, people didn't just worry. They invented ridiculously elaborate safety coffins for the profoundly paranoid. We're talking coffins outfitted with bells you could ring, little flags you could wave through an air pipe, maybe even a snorkel contraption. All designed just in case you woke up 6 feet under with a serious case of, oops, my bad. Imagine the sheer terror fueling that industry. It's one thing to fear death, it's another to invest in post-mortem panic buttons. You have to wonder how effective they were. Good luck getting decent bell reception down there, or convincing the gravedigger it wasn't just the wind. A truly dumb, desperate solution to a nightmare scenario. 18. Frontier life had no shortage of practical hazards. Rattlesnakes, bandits, dysentery. But few people expect their own pants to join the threat list. Yet thanks to mining work and the widespread use of saltpeter, potassium nitrate, some unlucky souls in the Wild West ended up with, quite literally, explosive trousers. Saltpeter, used in gunpowder and mining explosives, would sometimes soak into miners' clothes during work, especially when drying them near open flames or campfires. You can probably see where this is going. Add a little heat, a little friction, and boom. Congratulations, your pants are now a firecracker. Imagine trying to explain that injury to your buddies. No, really, it wasn't the whiskey or the poker fight. It was my trousers. It's hard to look tough when your own wardrobe stages a mutiny. Forget saloon brawls or duels. Sometimes the deadliest thing on the frontier was laundry day. 19. Frontier life demanded resilience, practicality, and agonizingly tight corsets, even while riding horseback. Yes, despite the rugged terrain, the demanding chores, and the need to, breathe, fashion dictated that women cinch themselves into rigid corsets. Imagine trying to mount a horse, let alone ride one for miles, while your internal organs are being rearranged like Tetris blocks by whalebone and laces pulled tighter than a banjo string. Comfort was clearly optional, maybe even frowned upon. It's a level of dedication to looking proper that borders on masochistic absurdity. Forget bandits or rattlesnakes. Just staying conscious in that getup during a bumpy wagon ride seems like the real Wild West survival challenge. Fashion over function, taken to a truly painful extreme. 20. Welcome to Deadwood in 1880, a town experiencing rapid growth and consequently the legendary Great Stink caused by truly epic levels of garbage mismanagement. We're not talking a few overflowing bins here. Imagine piles of refuse, raw sewage running in ditches, animal carcasses left to rot in the alleys, and just general filth accumulating everywhere until the entire town reeked like something crawled into the devil's armpit and died. It got so bad it literally triggered a typhoid outbreak. It's a stunning example of collective civic failure, prioritizing gold and gambling over, say, not living knee-deep in your own waste. Guess basic sanitation wasn't as exciting as a poker game until people started dropping like flies from preventable diseases. Smart move, Deadwood. Real smart. 21. Forget paved roads. Navigating the streets of many Wild West towns involved constantly dodging and weaving through an obstacle course of road apples, which is the polite, almost charming term for horse manure. With horses being the primary mode of transport, town streets were basically minefields of dung. Everywhere. All the time. Crossing the street wasn't just a walk. It was a strategic mission requiring careful footwork, a strong stomach, and probably holding your breath. Imagine trying to look dignified while hopping over fresh piles like you're in a gross version of hopscotch. Add rain, and you've got, well, use your imagination. It was just an accepted, incredibly smelly part of daily life. The original organic hazard. 22. Paying for your rot gut whiskey or supplies often involved gold dust, which sounds cool but opened the door to all sorts of wonderfully simple gold dust scams that apparently worked all the time. A common trick involved rigged scales, surprise, that always weighed light when you were paying. Or the classic bartender move, the generous pinch. When taking payment, they'd skillfully pinch a little extra dust between their fingers, maybe having applied a bit of sticky pomade beforehand for better grip. It seems laughably obvious, but in the dim light of a saloon, with questionable whiskey blurring judgment, countless prospectors likely got fleeced bit by bit. It's the kind of low-tech, high-audacity cheating that feels perfectly at home in the Wild West. Easy money if you had no conscience. 23. Got a raging toothache? Need a quick shave and a haircut? Maybe get that suspicious-looking wound checked out while you're at it? No need for multiple appointments. Just visit your friendly neighborhood barber-surgeon-dentist combo specialist. Yes, in many frontier towns, the guy who cut your hair was also the one pulling your teeth, lancing boils, performing minor, and sometimes major, surgery, and maybe even doubling as the undertaker. Qualifications, often dubious at best, enthusiasm probably trumped actual medical training. Imagine the multitasking, snipping hair 1 second, yanking a molar the next, maybe using the same unsterilized tools. It's terrifyingly efficient, a one-stop shop for grooming and potentially life-threatening medical procedures. What could possibly go wrong? 24. So, Wild Bill Hickok gets tragically shot in the back while playing poker. A grim end for a supposed legend. But apparently, just getting murdered wasn't dramatic enough for history. No, we needed the utterly obsessed over, likely fabricated detail of the dead man's hand, aces and eights. Here's the dumb part. Contemporary accounts barely mentioned what cards he held, but later storytellers decided plain old murder lacked pizzazz. They needed a cool, symbolic hand, and people latched onto it like gospel truth. Forget the tragedy. Let's argue for generations about the specific playing cards a guy probably wasn't even holding when he got plugged. It's like demanding to know the precise brand of banana peel someone slipped on before breaking their neck. Prioritizing a flashy, probably fake detail over the actual event? That's some next-level historical dumbness right there, focusing on cinematic props instead of, the actual death. 25. Some outlaws weren't just criminals. They were apparently aspiring influencers with terrible impulse control, engaging in the incredibly dumb practice of outlaws writing taunting fan mail, essentially to themselves via the newspapers. Instead of laying low, certain bandits loved the limelight so much they'd send letters to local papers, bragging about their exploits, correcting inaccurate reports of their crimes. How dare they get the details wrong? Or just generally trolling the sheriffs trying to hunt them down. It's like leaving a detailed Yelp review of your own bank robbery. While it probably fed their egos, it also often provided clues, confirmed their involvement, and generally made it easier for the law to track them. Peak criminal mastermind strategy, self-promotion leading directly to self-incrimination. Brilliant. 26. Forget subtle manipulation. Election day in many parts of the Wild West featured mind-bogglingly creative and brazen voting fraud that made a mockery of democracy. We're talking ballot boxes literally stuffed like Thanksgiving turkeys, names of dead people suddenly appearing on voter rolls. Apparently, the afterlife had strong political opinions. Votes openly bought with shots of cheap whiskey right outside the polling place, and good old-fashioned intimidation ensuring folks voted the right way. It wasn't just cheating, it was an art form, a public spectacle of rule-bending so blatant it was almost comical if it weren't, completely undermining the whole process. Honesty was clearly not the best policy when stuffing the ballot box was just faster. 27. Amidst the genuine dangers of the frontier, rattlesnakes, bandits, bad whiskey, many settlers wasted precious anxiety believing in the utterly ludicrous myth of hoop snakes. Seriously, otherwise rational adults genuinely bought into the idea of snakes that would bite their own tails to form a perfect circle, then roll downhill like a runaway tire at terrifying speeds to attack unsuspecting victims, sometimes even possessing a venomous stinger on their tail for good measure. Think about that image, a biological wheel of death. It's pure B-movie monster logic, yet the belief was widespread enough to be documented. How does that even work anatomically? It doesn't, which makes believing it profoundly, hilariously dumb. 28. Crossing a river? Got a rickety wooden ferry operated by someone whose main qualification seems to be owning a rope? Why not tempt fate by playing a deadly game of chicken with river ferries by overloading them? It seems common sense would dictate caution, but nope. People routinely crammed onto these often poorly maintained vessels, piling on wagons, livestock, and way too many passengers, apparently believing basic physics and buoyancy were optional out west. Unsurprisingly, this often ended exactly as you'd expect. Ferries capsizing, dumping everyone and everything into the river, leading to drownings and massive loss of property. It's a special kind of dumb to look at a clearly overloaded, unstable raft and think, yeah, room for one more cow. Safety third? More like safety wasn't even invited to the party. 29. Somewhere, in the hallowed halls of military planning, an officer, possibly after inhaling too much gun smoke, conceived the U.S. Army's truly brilliant bicycle experiment for frontier warfare. Yes, in the late 19th century, the Army actually formed bicycle corps, thinking these spindly machines would be perfect for reconnaissance and troop movement across the rugged western landscape. Imagine soldiers, laden with gear, trying to pedal heavy, primitive bicycles over rocky trails, through sand, up mountains. It was an unmitigated disaster. The bikes broke, soldiers fell constantly, and navigating actual wilderness proved impossible. It was less tactical advantage, more slapstick comedy routine meets scraped knees and bruised egos. A perfect example of a solution desperately searching for a problem it absolutely cannot solve. 30. What do you get when a condemned man in Placerville, California, nicknamed Hangtown for its swift justice, makes a final, extravagant meal request? Apparently, you get the Hangtown Fry, a bizarre last meal that somehow became a regional delicacy. The story goes that a prisoner facing the noose demanded a fancy dish using the most expensive ingredients he could think of: fresh oysters, shipped inland at great cost, and eggs. Someone cooked it up, and inexplicably this weird combo of fried oysters, eggs, and often bacon caught on. It's now considered a classic California dish. Celebrating a dish born from a condemned man's weirdly specific, slightly defiant last wish? That's uniquely morbid and honestly, kinda dumb. Food history is strange, folks. 31. When pioneers established a new settlement, what were the absolute first priorities? Shelter? Water? Nope. Very often it was building saloons, frequently multiple saloons, before bothering with trivialities like schools or churches. You'd roll into a brand new town and find 3 places to get blindingly drunk: a brothel, maybe a general store selling overpriced beans, but forget about educating the kids or saving anyone's soul. Those could wait. It paints a vivid picture of frontier priorities: immediate gratification, escapism, and profit over community infrastructure or long-term planning. Gotta get those whiskey profits flowing before you worry about little Timmy learning his ABCs. Makes perfect sense if your goal is maximum chaos and hangovers. 32. Forget fact-checking. Many Wild West newspapers operated on the principle of printing pure, unadulterated fiction and passing it off as news because reality was just too boring. Editors and writers frequently published outrageous tall tales, elaborate hoaxes about mythical creatures or miracle cures, and wildly sensationalized accounts of events with little to no regard for accuracy. Readers often devoured this stuff. Think of it as the golden age of fake news, embraced with gusto. Need to sell papers? Just invent a story about a 2-headed calf reciting Shakespeare or a gold strike guarded by giant badgers. The line between journalism and imaginative storytelling was blurry at best, and often gleefully trampled over for clicks, or whatever the 19th century equivalent was. Dumb, but entertaining? 33. Perhaps the peak of Wild West gullibility fueled by greed was the Great Diamond Hoax of 1872, where incredibly wealthy investors got epically duped. 2 cunning prospectors convinced some of the era's sharpest financial minds, we're talking bankers, politicians, even Tiffany & Co.'s founder, that they'd discovered a massive diamond field in the middle of nowhere. Investors poured fortunes into it. The reality? The prospectors had simply bought cheap, industrial-grade gems and sprinkled them around the site, salting the mine, to create the illusion of riches. The sheer scale of the deception and the monumental dumbness of supposedly brilliant men falling for such a simple trick, blinded by diamond fever, is staggering. Oops doesn't quite cover losing millions on fake shinies. That's grade A, top-shelf historical dumbness. So there you have it. 33 glimpses into the less glamorous, more absurd, and downright dumb side of the American Wild West. It wasn't all heroic standoffs and noble sacrifice. Sometimes it was just bad ideas, weird beliefs, and folks tripping over their own feet, metaphorically and literally. Makes you wonder what future historians will find hilariously dumb about our time, right? What modern craze or belief do you think will make the dumbest facts of the 21st century list? Let me know your predictions in the comments below. And hey, if you enjoyed this trip through historical facepalms, do me a solid. Shoot that like button and subscribe for more weird history.